Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about Donald Trump saying the CBS 60 Minutes should lose its license to broadcast because it aired two stories about him this last weekend that he sees as negative and critical of him. You're probably waiting now to hear what is the thing that actually would justify losing their license, because surely it couldn't be the mere criticism of the president, because nothing could be more central to First Amendment protections. But guess what? That's all it is. He is like getting increasingly lunatic. This is, would be a 1984 kind of plot, and maybe not even the most credible at that. You would think even despots, even Russia or Hungary, would pretend that their media can criticize the president. It is so down the middle of a constitutional right for the press and people, for that matter, the ability to criticize political officials. Some Supreme Court justices go for the idea of core First Amendment speech. Some think, they shouldn't actually demarcate that way, but by any token, anyone would say whether or not that makes it yet more protected. Criticism of the president, there just couldn't be more of a litmus test of whether you live in a free society than whether the media has the right to do that and the people have a right to hear it. It's so flagrant and crass that he's moved to this point. With other media, he's made the false suggestion of national security overtones and the like, total garbage, but at least evoking some kind of plausible executive power to protect our national security. This is just, they said negative things about me, they should lose their license. It's also, by the way, a really pristine illustration of the axiom with Donald Trump, which is, you're never, ever out of the woods, and a deal is only as good as that day, because it's clear one of the reasons for his ire against 60 Minutes was this report from the last election where Kamala Harris was interviewed. Trump was asked to be interviewed and he refused. And then the ensuing interview, Trump thought was too nice to Harris. And moreover, there was a version of it for the morning show and a version of it for 60 Minutes, as is very routine. In those instances, they were different. And from which Trump totally manufactured a whole claim of 60 Minutes falsifying the interview in order to support Kamala Harris. He sued, in fact, at the time, and CBS called the suit a joke. And everyone else, scholars, called it a joke. Because it was a joke. There was no cause of action there, and they hadn't done anything different from what they normally do. But that joke, as happened so much in the last few months, became deadly serious when Trump did this move that has proven really discouragingly effective, which is apply pressure to the parent company. So he did this with the LA Times, and that caused me to resign. And the Times capitulated, not because they were worried about the Times, but the owner was worried about his broader holdings. The same thing happened with Jeff Bezos and the Post, and the same thing happened here. CBS was ready to fight a stupid, silly suit, but Paramount, its parent company, is trying to put together a very big, very lucrative merger. And he basically said that he would illegally hold that hostage. And all of a sudden, Paramount and CBS was playing ball. But guess what? They were playing ball. His $10 billion suit, which is worth less than zero. First, he made it into his $20 billion suit. And they're negotiating that, but Paramount has made clear that CBS will play ball and capitulate in some way. And now, of course, that's not enough. He ups the ante, because now he's saying that this isn't enough for 60 Minutes. They haven't paid enough blood money. They still owe more, and that's because of the outrage that they continue to air negative coverage of them. What's the negative coverage, by the way? Well, there are people who basically are criticizing the Greenland deal. And why? Because it's moronic, and everyone is saying that. And then there are these, they had a piece on the Ukraine where Zelensky bemoaned the Trump triggered or pushed kind of better, brighter coverage of Russia, less coverage of the true suffering. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and we are all of a sudden switching sides to the bad guys. And CBS 60 Minutes, interviews Zelensky, who laments all this and explains why what Trump is saying, what the media is saying in the U.S. is a real distortion, wishes Trump would come to Ukraine, see the devastation that an invading imperialist Russia force has imposed on an basically innocent and more Western EU aligned, though they're not in NATO, Ukraine. And that's the other thing that's considered negative. So that's considered that reporting by the president of Ukraine, and the reporting by person after person who said, he's got to be kidding. What a bonehead move to try to push on, acquiring Greenland, which they've made clear, that you're going to have to do by some kind of military invasion. That's inane. That's any news story about Greenland or Ukraine, of course, would represent that point of view. And representing that point of view, which Trump decides is negative toward him, and it is, I think. I mean, I didn't see the two reports, but it probably is negative, because what he's doing is so not just idiotic, but it's idiotic with Greenland, but with Ukraine, it's much worse, and has to do with the whole approach to Putin and the realignment of our long-standing world order and place as the beacon of freedom in the world. It's just revolting and embarrassing anytime you look at it. The calling that out, even partially by 60 Minutes, is supposed to be a reason they should lose their license. Now, of course, if you go to the FCC and the standards for licensure, the number one thing it says is, of course, you can criticize the government. So he'd have to come up with some phony baloney thing. It could never fly. It would be subject to judicial review. I don't see it happening. On the other hand, he's totally happy to lie, and now has installed hand-picked lackeys at important executive branch posts like the FCC, who are more than happy to carry his lies into court. So we could well see an effort that would essentially push on, as so much of what they do pushes on, the assumption by the courts that the executive acts in good faith, because everyone would understand this is just nasty Trump territory, and trying to get at 60 Minutes, which the only thing more it's done than, in his eyes, than give negative reporting of the president is the thing for which he sued them without any merit at all on Kamala Harris. That's why they are potentially in the crosshairs of losing their license. It all couldn't be more illegitimate. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.